In this lecture, we are going to be talking about conversation-based. In this lecture, we are going to be talking about conversation-based enhancement for your memory. And the exercise is pretty simple. Talk to people about what you learned, discuss what you learned with other people, or even teach what you already learned. When you learn something new and you start discussing it with a friend or with your professor or with anyone, your memory system will start improving. You'll find yourself able to acquire and encode the information better, and you will eventually be able to recall it as well. Because not only is it based on a semantic memory system where you are memorizing general facts, but you're also moving it into an episodic memory system where this is based on a more personal experience where you were discussing this topic with a certain individual. Where you were discussing this topic with a certain individual. So when you're trying to recall the information, you're not just going to recall what you read based on your visual perception or what you were basically talking about while reading through your auditory perception, but you will also be able to base it on the conversation and the episodic memory that took place. And when you're talking about improving your long-term memory, when you store bits of information into your semantic and your episodic memory, this is you using two different aspects of an overall memory system, which by default will improve it further. Same thing goes for discussing and for teaching. Teaching is one of the most important aspects as well. When you teach somebody you learned, you are basically practicing repetition and you're enhancing the acquisition and the encoding process that you are going through. When you are reading information, you are going through the first encoding process. When you also teach the information, you're going through the second encoding process. And two encoding processes will always make sure that the amount of information stored in your memory system is greater than the amount of information you can store while just following one encoding system. But if you don't want to talk to other people about it, you can also practice this by questioning what you learned, by analyzing it, even teaching it to yourself in an understandable manner. If you open a textbook and you read through it, skim all the way to the last pages, you will see that there are some application exercises in a lot of textbooks where they ask you certain questions about what you read in the chapter. And this is not just there to waste your time. What's happening is they want you to question yourself based on the knowledge you acquired throughout the chapter to make sure that you enhance the acquisition, encoding, and eventually the recalling ability of the information. Also, when you analyze it or teach it to yourself, what's happening is that you're not just focusing on reading the information or summarizing it, but you're also consciously analyzing it. And we said before that if you want to move any bits of information from your short-term memory to your long-term memory, one of the main aspects is becoming conscious of the information in your short-term memory to move it into your long-term memory. Now, when you read something and you analyze it, you can't analyze something unless you're thinking consciously. You can't teach yourself something unless you're thinking about it consciously because the information is still fresh. Now, what's happening is When you are acquiring and processing this information twice, and especially the last stage on a conscious level, you will make sure that this information is not only stored in your short-term memory with the potential of loss of this information, but it is also, at least a big part of it, is being stored in your conscious long-term memory, and eventually, through practice and repetition, it will be stored in your unconscious memory, where you don't even have to think about the information, you just have it in your head at the spot.